You are live, Your Honor.
Thank you, James. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Newington Town Council regular meeting of Tuesday, September 28th, 2021. If you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
liberty, justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. We'll move on to roll call, please.
Counselor Anist. Here. Counselor Braverman.
Here.
Counselor Budraco.
Here.
Counselor Camillo.
Here.
Counselor Donahue.
Here.
Counselor Mankey.
Here.
Counselor Minor.
Here.
Counselor Nagel.
Here.
Mayor Del Buono.
Here. All right, thank you. Everyone is present. Next item is approval of the agenda. Counselor Menke.
Yeah, if we may, I'd like to remove under new bit, no, I'm sorry, under old business, item D, discussion of virtual meeting standards for boards, committees, and commission booklet.
Second.
Okay. Motion
our
made by
rationale-
Counselor Menke, seconded by
Second.
Counselor Camillo. Discussion?
Just our rationale is that when the new council takes over, they're going to have to adopt rules for the council. At that time, we might as well just hold this off and do it at that point.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of passing the agenda with that one change, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So we will remove item 7D. All right, next item this evening is awards and proclamations, and we have before us this evening a proclamation in recognition of lifeguards. James, is there anyone on the call accepting this, just so I know who to recognize?
The superintendent of parks is on, as well as most of the lifeguards being honored this evening.
Wonderful, thank you, and welcome to all of you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and read this proclamation into the record, and then we can discuss. Proclamation, recognition and commendation of 8 lifeguards. Whereas the Newington Parks and Recreation Department administers the operations of 3 pools annually, Church Hill Pool, Mill Pond Pool, and Newington High School Pool. And whereas every year, the department employs over 45 lifeguards throughout the year to lifeguard at the pools and teach swim lessons during our summer season at the outdoor pools and during swim lessons and recreational swim at the Newington High School Pool. And whereas we have over 45,000 visits to the pool each year. And whereas the American Red Cross certified water safety instructors teach over 2,000 swim lessons throughout the year. And whereas this year, we also taught American Red Cross training classes and certified 15 new lifeguards and 8 new water safety instructors. And whereas each summer, we have numerous special events, including kids' parties with a DJ, candy drops, dance parties, games, and more, birthday parties, and even a party for our senior and disabled swimmers. And whereas our lifeguards receive over 40 intensive training hours each summer and have to maintain their skills by doing weekly fitness requirements and in-service trainings. And whereas all that training proved to be successful, as 5 lifeguards successfully performed life-saving rescues on 5 of our patrons, and 3 more lifeguards performed critical care to injuries on the deck with the aid of their fellow lifeguards. And whereas they saved the Newington Parks and Recreation Department and the town of Newington from any and all negative impacts that could have occurred with an unsuccessful operation, as well as provided essential care to people who needed it. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed, the Newington Town Council wish to recognize and honor Sean Basie, Maddie Jordan, Jody Hammond, Mike Belkey, Bryce Turner, Amber Rocheleau, Gabriella Chargonska, and John Famiglietti for their heroism, initiative, work ethic, superb training, and ability to make the residents of Newington safe in our town's public swimming pools. Dated in Newington, Connecticut, this 28th day of September, 2021. Signed, Beth Del Buono, Mayor. Is there a second? Seconded by
Second.
Councilor Menke. Thank you. Any discussion by the council? Deputy Mayor Bedrejko.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I know a lot of people think being a lifeguard is kind of a glamorous job. You sit and you work on your tan or whatever, but it's not that. In fact, my niece is one in Reston. It's a job that requires constant vigilance, and the actions and the skills of those sitting on the chair, and their eyes constantly roving and looking for signs of distress, and making sure people are safe. It's a difficult job, and your actions and your conduct can make the difference between saving a life or tragedy. So I totally support this proclamation, and I thank the 8 of you plus all your other 45 colleagues who work throughout the year for this.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilor Menke.
Yes, I'd also like to congratulate the recipients of this proclamation. Reading this, I appreciate all the training that goes into making a lifeguard, and all the ongoing not only the training, but the ongoing training that they have to do. And I'm glad, not glad, but I'm happy they had the training when they needed it, and they were able to help these individuals who needed help from the lifeguard. So I would just congratulate them on their quick thinking and their willingness to take on this awesome responsibility of being a lifeguard. I think it's quite a responsibility, and I appreciate there are people that are willing to do it.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other hands up. Mr. DeMayo, did you want to add any thoughts to this? I know you brought this forward for the council's consideration.
I just want to thank the mayor and the town council for honoring these eight lifeguards. They're young people in Newington, and it's a big shout out. I always say that they're the Baywatch team of Newington, and they are dedicated. They have to be so mature to the age of 40s and over. And these are only 15, 16 to 20-year-old youth. So big shout out to them for their work ethic, their dedication, their teamwork, their training. They do endless hours of training, and we make them swim and exercise and do push-ups and sit-ups every day. It's incredible what they've done. And I'd also like to add a big shout out to their parents for raising such great young people. We're so proud to have them on our staff, and words cannot describe how important it is to have a great lifeguarding team. So thank you, council and mayor, to honoring them, and thank you, lifeguards and all your colleagues, the other 45 that are there too, for a job well done this summer.
Great, thank you, Bill. All right, let's do the formal vote, and then we can open it up if any of the lifeguards that are on the call want to say a few words. They're welcome to. So let's do our vote first. Councilors, if you'll unmute your mics, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. I see that we do have Bryce and Sean and Jody and John on the call. If any of you would like to speak, you're more than welcome to unmute and have a few words. And if not, we understand that too.
I'll say something.
Great, John, go right ahead.
Thank you for the honor. It's really appreciated from our behalf. I just wanted to thank the Newington Parks and Recreation Program for being very supportive and providing great training and mentorship. So thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, this is Sean.
Hi, Sean.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for this honor and for recognizing me and all of my coworkers. Working for Newington Parks and Rec has been an extremely incredible opportunity these past 5 years, and I hope that I get to continue in the future. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'll just add my thanks and congratulations on the proclamation, but thank you very much for not just the time of service that you give in terms of the training, but really what you do each and every day. People think of lifeguards, like Mr. DeMeo said, as the Baywatch, but in reality, there's so much more to it. People don't see, the less glamorous piece of it, which is life-saving. And so we really appreciate your efforts, and you were put in some precarious situations, and we really needed you there, and you were there for us and for our residents, and we greatly appreciate you. So thank you all. Okay. All right, folks, we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda. Thank you all for joining us. Next item is public participation. So any member of the public may raise their hand if you're in the Zoom app by raising your hand in the participants window, or if you're on your phone, *9 in order to raise your hand, and then we will recognize you. And I'm just going to switch over to my other window. And first we have Andy Brecker.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good evening, Mr. Brecker.
Good evening. My remarks this evening address agenda item 7C, Permanent Municipal Building Commission. First, I'd like to thank the council for including several of the suggestions I made to the original draft ordinance in the draft distributed on September 24th. You're making good progress, although the ordinance still needs a lot of work before it can be adopted. The central issue is whether enough qualified individuals can be recruited to serve on a permanent commission. I like the increase from 5 members to 7, but it should really be at least 9 to allow for more diversity and expertise and increase the chances of having a quorum. All of the commissioners should be subject matter experts, not just some, since that is the point of establishing a permanent commission. If you don't think you can recruit them, stop now. We've never been told the compelling reason for establishing a permanent commission. So if it can't go forward for practical reasons, then we stay with what we have, which has served us well. I personally like the idea of a permanent commission that would be comprised of experts and would serve for 5 to 7 years, long enough to transcend multiple projects. Any term shorter makes no sense. Composition paragraph 1 should be further revised to include people with backgrounds as engineers, attorneys, dispute resolution professionals, construction cost accountants, building material suppliers, construction managers, environmental experts, information technology, hardware managers, facility supervisors, and others familiar with designing, constructing, and operating municipal and school buildings and grounds, as well as resolving issues and disagreements associated with construction projects. These are not only valuable skills for commission members to have, but they broaden the pool of potential candidates. Don't be lazy. Brevity in an ordinance is nice, but more words provide for more understanding. A rewrite is required to clarify all commissioners are appointed by the town council. You can divvy up who will recommend candidates, but in the end, there should be no political appointments, only qualified individuals. We should aspire to have a building commission that is non-political, with their focus entirely on getting projects capably completed on time and within budget. Moving on, it is imperative to define what existing projects will be under the jurisdiction of this new commission. A clever piece of wordsmithing excludes the town hall project and Anna Reynolds because the funding for them was approved by referendum. Your intentions for the other existing building committees shouldn't be hidden. You should tell the public if you intend to disband the current Mill Pond, Library, West Meadow Cemetery, and John Wallace building committees and have them taken over by the new commission. And you also need to sunset the existing Chapter 8, Article 10, or we will end up with 2 charter sections on building committees. It is also imperative to define when new projects will be under the purview of the Permanent Commission. The reference in definition section 1 to Charter Chapter C408 is useless. C408 has to do with bonds, notes, and emergency appropriations, not construction projects. And C408 covers all appropriations from $0 to infinity. What is needed is a specific cost amount, let's say $2 million. Above that, the project must be handled by the Permanent Commission. Below that, it could be at the town council's discretion. But that's not enough. The type of project, the type of project must be defined. There are several references to major maintenance in the proposed ordinance. at one point defining that as anything more than $25,000. It's silly to burden a permanent commission with such small projects. You should really sit down with the Board of Ed to develop a specific list that will have permanent commission oversight. The BOE competently completes millions of dollars of projects each year. You even set up a special capital account for them. Do they really need this additional proposed layer of bureaucracy? And what about projects paid for mostly by non-town funds? Can't they be handled by administration? What about bridges and dams and towers and IT infrastructure? Again, let's not be lazy. Let's take the time to think this through and be specific. A lot more attention needs to be given to definitions, and IT should not be excluded as currently stated in definition section 12. It is too big a deal in today's world. The sections covering selection of architectural, engineering, and project management need updating. Language about the town council rejecting the commission's recommendations and appointing their own specialists should be struck. Simply put, the commission should recommend architects, engineers, project managers, and the like to the council. The council approves those recommendations or not, end of story. Power and duties and construction procedure need to be made consistent. The commission should approve all change orders and disbursements after receiving certifications from architect, engineer, and owner's representative. The town manager is then responsible for actually making the payments through the finance director. Building project procedures, section M, should also be amended to require a commissioning agent for any building project over a threshold cost level. Let's say again, $2 million, with its report included in the closeout documents. I hope you will take the time to make the changes I have suggested and not act to approve the draft ordinance as written tonight. There is still a lot to consider, and frankly, the text should really have a careful editing for completeness, clarity, consistency, and grammar. After all, an ordinance is much more than a simple town council resolution. It will bind us to the way municipal and school construction gets done for decades. Let's make sure it is right and smart before adopting it. Oh, it would also be really nice if when a new final draft is completed, that the council holds another public hearing so that the public can weigh in on the significant changes that have been made since the initial introduction.
I need you to.
And
wrap
one
that
last
up.
thing, I'm wrapping up. One last thing, if it turns out to be too challenging to create a permanent commission right now, it is okay to stay with what we have. There's no shame in having tried, only to realize time and circumstances are not ideal to make a change. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on, the next caller is Rose Lyons. I apologize. I believe that did go over 4 minutes, but the timer on the screen was not started by accident. So we apologize for that. Ms. Lyons.
Oh, sure. Rose Lyons, 46 Elton Drive. Now you're going to put the time clock on. Anyway, just kidding. I always like listening to what Andy has to say. I'd just like to make a comment about the dog park that is proposed. I know that it was asked at the last meeting whether or not there could be some sort of sign at Young Farm that the dog park had been established in the center of town, and if people wanted to let their dogs run freely, that they should bring their dogs to that park and not to Young Farm. And I think the reply was that since they've been allowed to do it for so long, it's going to be hard to try and get them to change. Well, there is an ordinance in town, as far as I know, and on public property, you're supposed to keep your dog leashed. If you're in your own yard, you're supposed to keep your dog under control, which leaves a lot to interpretation. But they're not in their own yards, they're on public property. So out of respect for those that either have fears of dogs, have allergies to dogs, or just don't like dogs, I would hope that the police department and the animal control officer will do something to enforce the ordinance. Just because it wasn't enforced doesn't mean that it's not in effect. Just want to put a plug in once again. If there's monies to go around for a dog park, maybe there's, from the COVID monies, maybe there's money to go around for the dredging of Mill Pond or Millbrook and Piper Brook. That's my little pet project now these days. I'm glad to see that there's an item on the agenda for the people that are going to be doing the grant writing. I hope we'll be getting updates on what has been already approved and where we stand with some of the things that we're going to get or trying to get. And I'm just curious whether or not, now that we have a grant writer, will they still bring the proposed grant applications to the town council for approval so you can find out whether we need matching funds. I know that the virtual meetings standards were taken off the agenda, but I'm hoping that when they do review it, that there will be roll call votes on important matters. I know different commissions have different ideas of what they should and shouldn't do. I personally would like to see TPZ do a roll call vote on their applications. I think it's important, saying that those can be contested, they can be appealed, that we know who voted and how they voted. And last but not least, I know that it's probably up to the town manager or the town council as to whether or not we have to wear masks in stores or not, and I'm finding it, I just might as well just put a mask on because I go to West Hartford and I need a mask. I come to Newington, or I'm in Newington, I don't need a mask. I just was wondering what the rationale is for us not mandating masks in the town of Newington. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lyons. Next is Leanne Menke.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Leanne Mankey, 112 Northwood Road. I would like to speak to item 7, item C, regarding the Permanent Municipal Building Commission. First of all, I want to thank the council for working to improve it. A lot of the comments that Andy had, I agree with. I do think it needs to be cleaned up and fine-tuned. I'm trying to clarify a few things. I was under the impression, and again, part of it is blue, purple, and black and red printing, trying to sort out what's current, what's not. I was under the impression the commission would have 5 voting members. I see now it's 7. I just wonder which the 7 are, because when you go down the 3 members that are recommended by the town manager, is that now 5 that are the building? I just need some clarification about what's going from here. And again, the numbers have shifted. Also under item 5, I appreciate that the Lucy Robbins Wells Library has been added into that, but is it 2 or 1 voting member? And again, that perhaps has to change if it's 5 versus 7 because of the private ownership aspect. I just need some clarification there. And again, I also would like to clarify the status of those projects that have building committees but have not yet gone to referendum. There doesn't seem to be anything addressing that. And I would like to get that clarified as well. Again, I appreciate your work, but I also concur with Andy that I think maybe this needs to have a little bit more work put forward and some more input. I don't think, personally, I don't believe this is a finished product. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mankey. Just one more check to make sure no one else has their hands up. And I do not see anyone, so we will move on to remarks by counselors on public participation. All right, I will just mention a couple of things. The language that was in the packet, I believe both caucuses have looked at in terms of the building project committee, and we will have a further discussion later on. Some of the language that was in there didn't necessarily reflect, I think, what our discussion was last time, as well as perhaps some changes that we're talking about again. So that's the language that's in there is certainly not a done deal. We will be discussing that further later on in the meeting. And Ms. Lyons, the dog park, we're not taking action on it yet. We're looking tonight to possibly send it to TPZ for an 8-24 referral to make sure that we are covering all bases before we go ahead and approve that. So that action won't take place tonight other than the referral to TPZ. So I just wanted to mention that. Oh, and the roll call vote, Ms. Lyons, you mentioned. And when we first started doing Zoom meetings, I was doing a roll call vote on every vote because I thought it made sense. The state, when I reviewed their guidelines, it indicated that a verbal vote was adequate unless there was dissension. So if there is 2 differing, if anybody is opposed, then I would always do a roll call vote to make sure we have it on the record of how people voted. So that's how we're handling it right now in the meantime, but that hopefully will be addressed by the next council when they do their rules of procedure. All right. Okay, so we'll move on now. The next item is consideration of old business, and the first item is the health update, COVID-19. Mr. Chapman.
Yes, unfortunately, we are back in the red again, as many of the other towns in the area are. I think we have to plan on being in the red for the future. I don't know whether it's long-term or short-term, but there's just too many issues going on that need to be addressed. Some of it through vaccination of the younger children in the town, as well as some of the folks that have held back on getting vaccinated. But I don't see that we're going to be coming out of the red or orange while these various challenges continue. So I would say that you will continue to be doing Zoom meetings for the foreseeable future. And I would love to say something different, but I'm not going to, deceive people. It's just not a good situation, and I'm not sure when it's going to get any better. That's it.
Any council question or comment? Council Donahue?
Keith, just personal information. I mean, how are these numbers calculated? I mean, I keep hearing it's based on 100,000 people. There's not 100,000 people in Newington. So, I mean, how are these numbers arrived at?
It's all percentages of total population, and it's done on a I believe weekly basis. And I can get you a more specific answer. I'll get it from the district in writing. But it isn't saying that there's 100,000 people in Newington, certainly. But based upon the 30,000 or whatever population that we do have, the percentages indicate that we fall into the red.
Yeah, I just like to see some numbers, because they don't, according to what I saw on the news, the state's actually going down, but we're going up.
Yeah, you're right. There's some mixed messages going on, but I will get from the district exactly how this is calculated out.
Excellent. Thank you.
Councilor Menke.
Yeah, it'd be nice if we could just legislate this whole thing away and just have a roll call vote and say we're over with it. But do we know what our numbers are compared to our area surrounding towns?
There are a number of towns that are in the red at this point. There are some that are in the orange. There's actually some in the state that are in the yellow and in the gray. It's all over the place.
Is there any segment of our population that's more redder than others?
I don't have that information tonight.
Okay,
I can get it for you.
Yeah, because I mean, is it mostly younger people, older people, middle-aged people?
I believe that the largest increase are young adults. The senior population has a pretty good handle on the vaccines. The middle-aged are mostly vaccinated. It's the younger adults that are not fully vaccinated and seem to be having the most incidents of COVID, as well as there is an increase in the number of school-age children that are receiving it as well.
Thank you.
Minor.
Thank you. Keith, I just wanted to follow up. So you're talking about the foreseeable future. I know our last meeting, we had talked about having 2 consecutive weeks within the same range to consider stepping down to the next step. Are we following a policy and procedure to it, or are we modifying it based on what the current conditions are? Because I've got a lot of people just confused as to why certain things are open, why certain things are closed, and if there's a rationale to it. And I just would rather have a straight answer for them.
The way in which we're conducting is based upon a weekly read of what color we're in. If we, for an example, if we're in red this week and we go to orange next week, we still will carry on the red until the following week. And then if orange shows up again, then we will go to the orange because we have 2 consecutive weeks. That has not been the case. We've been flipping back and forth between orange and red for the last couple weeks. I think our orange was 1% or one step away from being in red the last time we were in orange. So it's teetering between orange and red, but we look at it that we have to have 2 confirmed weeks in a row of the same color before we take an action to change the way in which we're operating.
Okay, this would, already, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Pedrejko?
Yes, kind of related to what Ms. Lyons was speaking about. I'm just wondering if you've gotten any feedback or inquiries or comments from our restaurants or business owners in terms of mandates or what they'd like the town to do or not to do. Are they satisfied? Are they happy that we're keeping it, that we're not imposing a mandate? Just curious.
The feedback that I've gotten is that they're very appreciative that they weren't required to have masks if anyone goes into their buildings. Some restaurants and other businesses have gone ahead and mandated it themselves for their particular building. But from what my feedback is, the businesses are pleased that we have not arbitrarily sent their customers out of town for those customers that don't necessarily want to wear a mask. And we have people coming into town from other towns that are requiring the masks inside private businesses and so forth. So we actually have probably an increase in business in town because we're not requiring the masks to be worn.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Anist?
Keith, do we know the towns that are requiring masks? What are their numbers like? Have you looked at that?
No, the whole idea of having the towns require private property owners to require masks to be worn. I think that those towns that are currently not requiring it are basing their decision on the fact that this is a statewide situation that should be out of the governor's office, not individual towns. So I think for Newington, I'm a big proponent that this is a statewide or national problem. It's not a town of Newington problem. And we really should not be placing restrictions on our own private companies and businesses on how they operate. If it was a governor ordered statewide, 100% supportive. But I don't see how we can, in good conscience, dictate to our businesses when the governor is not dictating to those businesses. So
And I totally understand that, but I would like to know numbers of the towns that are requiring masks. Where are they in their numbers?
I just pulled up, I don't know if you saw it, but the entire state of Connecticut, if you go to ct.gov, the website, and click on a COVID-19 data tracker, you can click on each separate community and see what their numbers are by community. So, right now we're in the red. New Britain next door to us is in the red. Weathersfield is in the red. Hartford's in the red. West Hartford is down into the orange, but just barely. They're at 13.5, so they just barely made it into it. Rocky Hill is as well with 12.5. So it's kind of a mixed match. Just like we were in the red, we went down to orange. Now we're back in the red. We're all kind of on that cusp number in central Connecticut.
No, and I get it. But there are so many businesses that are opened. That's all I'm gonna.
Okay. Councilor Camillo?
In West Hartford, Weathersfield, Rocky Hill, they have a mask mandate. And for the businesses, the customers are walking away. They'd rather go to towns that don't have a mask mandate. I've talked to a couple banks. They're open, but there's nobody going to the bank. Their business has increased in the town next to them that doesn't have a mask mandate. And our numbers are all about the same, whether we're wearing it or not. So Like I told the governor a couple weeks ago when he asked if we had one, I said, that's your job, just like you just said, Keith. And he just smiled and walked away from me. So
We can get the statistics on how many towns out of the 169 do require, and those that don't. I will have that for you and send it out to you.
I'll just say anecdotally, I've been watching the numbers, at least in our surrounding communities, and I haven't necessarily seen a trend of the communities that I know of that are imposing a mask mandate, having their numbers come down dramatically or be any different than ours in any statistically significant way. So anecdotally, I don't see a big difference between the two. So Councilor Minor, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up of the timing that we're looking at now is we're basically looking at a period, we work 2 weeks in arrear. So if you look at that period, you have the start of school, you have Labor Day gatherings. So you have new transmission from different cohorts that haven't been exposed to each other before. The question or the concern I've got with us continuing to keep our buildings locked down is why are we not just requiring our patrons to wear a mask if they're conducting business in the building? They're expected to do that now in a lockdown environment. Why can't we simply unlock the doors and require them to wear a mask when they come in? Why are we taking a step further of saying we need you to fill out your COVID, 5-question COVID, which is something that you wouldn't do to conduct business at a restaurant, a bank, or anywhere else? That's all I'm saying is, are we delivering the same level of service now, or can we do it differently to not limit people's interactions?
When we did not have the lockdown on the town hall, for an example, we had people roaming the halls unaccounted for, not knowing if they were exposed, not knowing if they had any protection whatsoever, whether they even had their masks on. If somebody was walking down the hall, we tried doing it an unlocked, open process, and it was we had our own employees complaining that people were walking into their offices unmasked, and it's just not conducive to protecting our employees or our visitors that come to the town hall. We encourage people that if they need to come to town hall, they can come. They come to the entrance. They have to check in, and the office that they're visiting is contacted. We're not saying you can't get your business done in town hall, but if you want to do it, then yes, you may be a little bit inconvenienced, but we're trying to help people stay safe. And shame on us if we don't and people get sick.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing with that point, but I'm just saying it's contradictory to saying it's not important enough for businesses to require, but we do require if you're within a town hall building. And it's not necessarily town hall that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the library, I believe, now requires, appointments to go browse. And the senior center, I don't even know operationally if they're doing anything at all. All I'm saying is, wouldn't it make more sense to allow that programming to continue in a controlled environment to say, we're sorry, but if you're going to be within the town building, that you need to wear a mask or you're not going to be able to be allowed to stay, versus just not allowing that programming to occur at all. And the confusion, I think, is, well, we've got recreational programming that's occurring in school buildings, yet we don't have the same recreational programming occurring in, our new Mortensen Community Center. How is one different from the other if the risks are the same? And are we following the guidance of the CIAC, which originally last year shut everything down? And then after they were able to gather data over the period of a year, we're able to adjust that. So as the fall sessions are now starting now, they have a fairly good handle on what the requirements are and ways to mitigate and reduce the transmission. So that's just where I'm coming from on it. And I'm just curious to know if that's ever been considered or not.
Well, what we're doing is we're following the health district that we have employed by the town, the regional health district. I believe the schools operate under a different set of circumstances with a different, we'll say, recommendations coming from who they are listening to. different type of a health district, whether it be state or whatever. But the schools are not following our local district recommendations. They're following what the schools in general are following. So there is a difference there. Whether they're right or whether they're wrong, I can just tell you that there are kids that are isolated right now because of exposure in our school system. So I'm not here to judge who's right or who's wrong. I'm only here as the public safety director to try to keep our employees and our residents safe.
And I applaud the efforts. There's no disrespect from that regard, but I'm just curious to how we have a 4-town health district, and I can speak specifically to Weathersfield because I was there the other day and walked right into their library that was open. And I'm just curious to why, again, I understand that each town manager has their own authority and their own rights to follow the direction of the health director. But I'm just curious if there's been any conversations between town managers of consistencies within our district versus to all following our own separate rules where Weathersfield requires masks and we don't, or you know what I mean? To just have consistency within our 4.
I will tell you that we have had conversations with the other towns in our district, and the initial plan when COVID started up again several months ago was that we were all going to follow the guidelines outlined by the health district. Unfortunately, I believe that some of the towns have deviated from the health district's recommendations due to pressure from citizens, political groups, whatever it may be. But we, as in the town of Newington, I'm pretty solid following the guidelines that are laid out by the director of the health district.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Nagel?
First of all, thank you for putting the map up that shows COVID cases per person so that everyone has a visual of it. And it clarifies, even though we may not all be happy about it, the situation as it stands. Keith, you just answered one of the questions I was going to pose about why we have the library not fully opened as the Weathersfield one is. But I also want to know how town buildings are used or not used, masked or not masked, have to do with the structure and the arrangement of the building and the size of the building that would make one building accessible and one not.
Well, if I may, David, I can tell you that in the town hall, if you think about the configuration of the town hall, there's probably 4 or 5 ways you can get into this building. To not have it locked down, but to be assured that we have no one coming in that's not wearing a mask, we would have to station some type of security at every one of those doorways. Not really feasible with the staff level that we have and the dollars we have. I think the way we've set it up with the one door being unlocked and coming up to the attendant is very helpful. I think that our employees feel much more safe, and we control the situation. Otherwise, we would be back several months ago where we had people walking the hallways that we had no idea who they were and where they were going, and if they had been wearing their mask or not wearing their mask. It just was not a situation that was conducive to keeping people healthy.
I agree with you, Keith. Having taught in a large high school for many years, safety in doors locked and unlocked creates huge problems in terms of safety and other kinds of things. For instance, like the library, is there a reason, aside from what you stated and following the rules of the health district, in terms of the size and structure of our library would prohibit us from doing something whereby another library, which is more spacious and has a different configuration, allows more groups. Is that a criteria that's used in terms of determining that and other buildings?
I would venture a guess that that's part of why some of the towns are open and other towns are not in each individual building. We also have conversations with the health director as he's seeing what's going on statewide and nationally. I know that the senior center just recently, I believe, got approval from Mr. Brown, Director Brown, to open up at least a portion of the senior center for a limited number of activities. So that's going to be happening very soon. The library already is open on a limited basis for browsing purposes. That may be expanded. You know, we don't know. We don't know if we're going to be having spikes in these numbers or whether we're going to stay just about where we are in red, which we're not deeply into the red, but we're in the red. And it may be over time that some of these restrictions get lifted based upon if we're going to be in the red for the next 3 years, we can't probably expect people to live under the red restrictions for the next 3 years. So again, it's a judgment call. It's not easy, but we feel that we're protecting our citizens and our employees.
I do realize that nothing is definitive, and I share your frustration in terms of what one would like to do, what one sign says one should do, what the health district says, and appreciate your trying to get a handle on it to keep our citizens here in town safe. Thanks.
Counselor Mankey?
Yeah, really quick, 2 points. One, I did have to have occasion to go into town hall today. It was, it was obviously I had to stop and give my name and answer those questions, and it didn't take more than a couple of minutes. I thought the staff was really courteous and explained the whole process to us, and I appreciate that. And I just wonder if maybe next meeting we can get Charlie Brown here to actually give us some more information about other towns and what they're doing, and see if there's any correlation between masks and not masks. I suspect not, because most of us travel between, most of us don't spend our whole day in one town. We spend our day in many towns if we're out and about. So I don't know if that makes a difference, but it would be helpful to get him here next time. Thank you.
Certainly.
All right. I don't see any other hands up. Mr. Chapman, I wanted to thank you. I know these are very difficult decisions that you're making, and you're doing that as scientifically as possible with recommendations from CCHD. I appreciate your efforts in that regard. And there's certainly differing opinions on every single aspect of how we handle COVID. But when I go to the doctor's office, they're still taking my temperature and they're still asking me those 5 questions. If I go to a restaurant, they're not. If I go to a restaurant in another town, I might have to wear a mask until I get to my table. And some towns you don't have to. So it still is very, very varying, depending on the community you're in. And you're making difficult decisions to protect our employees as well as our residents. And, I appreciate that. I know it feels like you're taking a lot of flack for it. Hopefully you don't take that to heart, because I think you're doing a great job with the information that we're provided. And, this is ever changing, guys. We all know that. We've lived it. So as this evolves and we keep getting new information and new advice, we'll keep following it. All right, next item is the TPZ referral under Connecticut General Statute 8-24 for municipal dog park proposal. As you know, last meeting, it was brought to us a proposal for a municipal dog park that would be over on the corner of John Stewart and Constance Lee. It would be on Hartford Healthcare property, but us renting it, so to speak, or leasing it, I should say, for $1 per year. I wanted to say that again, $1 per year, because on Facebook, people started complaining about, why are we leasing property? It's just a formality. They would let us do it for nothing, but as a municipality, we need to make sure we're accountable for what we're doing. So we pay $1 per year on the lease if it is approved. We're not looking to take action on the actual dog park tonight, but merely to refer it to TPZ for 8-24. I think technically, because it's a town project, we don't have to do this. This is something that this council has made a priority in the past, saying that we should be held to the same standards as everyone else. And so we would look to forward this evening. There is a resolution on the screen. And with that explanation, Mr. Chapman, if you have anything else to add, or else we'll open it up to council.
No, I would just say that I did check. There was a couple of questions. One was on liability insurance. I talked to our risk manager on this matter, And with the dog park being managed by the town, there will be no change in the annual fee policy cost for insurance. Our insurance is basically a result of claims. If we have high claims, our policies will go cost more money. If we have low claims, then it may actually go down. So having the dog park established and operating will not have any impact on our insurance cost unless we have major losses. And as far as that goes, I did do further investigation. We are not going to require that people have licenses on their dogs. We're not going to require that they've been vaccinated, sort of like what we do with people right now. We don't have that right, and I guess you could say we could require people to bring to a public dog pound the paperwork on their dogs that would reflect that they've had their vaccinations. So those two issues were raised, and I think I've adequately answered both questions.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Minor.
Thank you. Keith just got an opportunity to discuss it with Attorney Ancona in terms of what exposure we might have in terms of inviting, dogs into a common area, and if any incidents were to happen, if we'd have any liability to it. That's the first question.
Well, I haven't specifically asked the attorney, but I'm sure that being that the town has deep pockets, no matter what happens on any properties that we own or manage, if somebody gets injured in some fashion, I'm sure that their attorney will be serving notice to the town along with whoever else they can find.
Okay, and then the second question.
But I will run.
Okay, and if you had the
I will run
opportunity,
it by the town attorney.
and the second
I'm sorry,
question,
go ahead,
was
Chris.
the animal control officer, if you've had the opportunity to speak with them directly to get their support.
I haven't at this point. I will be. It depends on how this thing goes forward. I don't want to get everybody involved to a great degree until we know that this is going to happen. So I will have the police chief talk with the dog wardens and get a take from them. But these dog parks are pretty common throughout the whole state of Connecticut now. So I don't see any real issues, but if there are, we'll address them.
Okay, and just a last quick question, what chance to take a look at the parking over on John H. Stewart to figure out exactly if that's something that we'd be parking elsewhere, or what the rationale was in terms of parking over.
Yes, we've walked that area. There are about 3 or 4 cars generally that are parked on John Stewart Drive that I believe, instead of using the parking lot at the apartment complex just to the south, they end up using John Stewart Drive for parking. There will be plenty of parking. We don't anticipate large crowds of people going to the dog park and staying for hours upon time. Usually people go to the dog park, they go in the morning for a couple hours and socialize and the dogs play, and then other people come later in the day and so forth. So I think parking between John Stewart Drive, Constance Lee Drive, and if we had a major overflow for some reason, then we would say municipal parking lot. But I think we're fine with the parking the way we're looking at it. And the ambulance in that area will not have any parking at any time.
Okay, and just want to your first comment with regards to licensing and vaccinations. So we currently have on, it's current ordinance now that dogs be licensed. Is there any reason why we wouldn't be following through with those to make sure that they are licensed if they're on our own town property versus being on somebody's private property?
We would not station people at this dog park to do, we just be extreme cost. I don't know of any dog parks that I've visited that have people stationed, security or whatever, to monitor the dogs coming in and out, because we don't, I mean, if we get a complaint, then certainly we respond, but just as was pointed out at Deming Young Farm, there's no one down there that monitors which dogs are licensed or not. I mean, we track dog licenses every year when they get renewed. We certainly would know who doesn't get their dog's license renewed, but we're not going to be stationing anybody up there to monitor and enforce the dog license rule.
Okay, no, I was just Hill had opened up their park, that they did have their animal control agent had spent some time up there, more about education than enforcement. And they did see an uptick on people actually going and getting their dogs licensed because the animal control officer was there on a regular basis. And over a period of time, it worked.
Oh, I would anticipate that our animal control officers will be visiting that site, and certainly will be educating people that may not have licenses on their dogs, and maybe do some types of workshops on occasion if the weather's right, and have groups of people learn a little bit more on dog, we'll say, behavior and so forth. But to have someone stationed there whenever the dog park would be open would be expensive, very expensive. Now, if somebody wants to volunteer within the town to take a shift, that would be fine. We could work that out. But I don't see us having the funds to pay someone to be at the dog park.
Okay, and I know last thing you said that you had had some interest possibly from a contractor that might possibly do some work on the park. I was just looking to see if you were able to figure out any more on that, or if it was still up in the air.
I am meeting with the landscaper on Thursday at the site. We'll walk it, determine what needs to be done, and figure out if they're capable of taking us on as a volunteer, give back to the town, we'll say. So I'll know better after Thursday.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Counselor Anist?
Thank you. Keith, if you look at Rocky Hill, our secretary is very nice enough to send us out their regulations. And one of the first thing on there, dog park at your own risk. Dogs must display a valid license and up-to-date rabies vaccination tag. I think it should be on the sign, even though you're not going to have somebody to enforce that.
Oh, definitely. It will be posted up there, but for enforcement purposes, it'll be as catch kids catch can. Or if somebody reports somebody, then descriptions are very good, and we'll kind of keep an eye on when that dog shows up again, and then they'll be confronted and challenged as to vaccinations and licenses. Yes.
That wasn't my question. My question is, once the 824 goes through, can you please reach out to NEMS? They do have some concerns with the sirens. Dogs act aggressively. A lot of them do when sirens go off. They're also concerned if somebody's walking the street with their dog and the ambulance has to take off rather quickly, or the paramedic. So, I don't know. It was very difficult to see on what we have where the entrance is going to be. So I would just ask if you could just reach out to them and just discuss this with them.
Sure will.
Deputy Mayor Bedrejko?
I think the intent of this was to be something somewhat low cost and low maintenance. So I think that it may be premature, or I certainly wouldn't want to see us, getting hung up on, new parking spaces or tons of regulations and rules and staff monitoring it. So that's, let's see how it goes. And if it turns out to be really popular, then, we can really, go from there and make improvements. But right now, I thought the point was to be somewhat low cost, low maintenance, but yet to provide, a nice little service to dog owners in town, and also to get away from some of the concerns and complaints we've been getting at the Young Farm. Second of all, I did hear some things about using COVID money. I personally am opposed to that. I don't really think that that's a good use of COVID funds. So I hope that we're not going to be considering too much use of that. I think the funds were intended for something. And I just don't feel comfortable ethically of using COVID funds for a dog park. But third of all, there have been residents making some comments about upkeep of some of our other town parks and facilities. So this is adding another area to their plate. And I mean, who will be picking up
the landscapers will do the mowing, that will be all done by the landscapers. As far as cleaning up debris, what we anticipate will happen is the users of the park will be, again, there'll be directions given to them. There'll be doggy bags available. We expect the owners of the dogs to pick up. There will be some receptacles available where they can toss their baggies and whatever other debris they have. But it is not at all intended that this is going to be a high level maintenance by town employees whatsoever.
But I do believe that certainly at least once or twice a week, a town employee will have to take a drive by there, because unfortunately not all residents are going to be adhering, to the cleanliness standards. And that's where, according to some veterinarian friends I know, where disease and problems can spread among the animals. So I would hope that there'd be some kind of monitoring other than just an honor system. Thank you.
Okay. All right, can someone go ahead and read the actual resolution this evening is about referring to TPZ?
I'll do it.
Could someone read that?
I'll read it.
Okay, Councilor Mankey.
Resolved, the Newington Town Council hereby directs and authorizes the town manager to submit to the Town Planning and Zoning Commission for its report in accordance with Section 8-24 of the Connecticut General Statutes, the municipal dog park proposal.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Nagel. Any further discussion on the referral to TPZ?
If I might,
Yes.
this is a process and a consideration that has been going on for years and years and years. And indeed, at least some segment of the community has been asking for repeatedly, wondering why Newington hasn't found a place for its dogs to essentially go to have free run or walk or whatever, as opposed to surrounding towns. So this isn't a quick decision, nor necessarily a rushed one, but it's good to see that there is some movement no matter what the final resolution happens to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nagel. Anyone else? All right, please unmute your mics and we'll go to a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We will refer this to TPZ. All right. The next item on our agenda is adoption of the Permanent Municipal Building Commission creation. We have discussed this at a few council meetings already. And there was language that we had discussed last time. And I know that I believe both caucuses have been working on some proposed changes. So I will open it up for discussion first. Who would like to start? I'll start.
I can start.
I always
We
like
just
to refer to the counselors first if possible, so.
We just proposed a few changes, and so I could just probably walk through them, or maybe James can put them on the screen. I know it's kind of confusing with the different color colorizations or whatever. But the first thing we want to take out of the first page is where under powers and duties, where it says maintenance projects. We envision this would be just for building projects. So a maintenance project like fixing a roof, if it's under, it doesn't have to go to bonding or a referendum, then it would be done just by the facilities director and not by a building project, building committee or a building commission. And then also under the next page on section 8, where it says major maintenance, we would take that section out also.
Okay.
Under the section for composition, we're proposing that there would be 4 permanent building experts with basically building backgrounds, whether it be whatever field, but with building backgrounds. We were proposing that the town manager would select a pool of those people and submit them with the resumes for review by the council, and the council would appoint 4 of those people. There's and again, these would be people who are qualified based on their experience or knowledge of the building trades. So they would be chosen to serve under that under those qualifications. Then there would be 2 people appointed, 1 from each party, so 1 Republican, 1 Democrat, and they'd be appointed by the political parties as building committees are appointed now, and then they would be approved by the town council. And then if it was a requesting department, for instance, say Parks and Recreation, or the fire, or the Board of Education, or the Senior Center, they would get one voting member as part of that committee. So in those cases, there would be a total of 7 people on the committee, of 4, 2, and 1. In the case if it's a library project, as the library trustees own their own building, then they would be afforded 2 voting members, and of course those people would have to be approved by the council, like any other appointments to any of the commissions or boards.
Okay.
And then I think, James, you had a section about the terms. Did I go by it already?
We did. That was the back one.
Okay, so we also proposed, I missed it here.
Item 3.
Item 3, I'm sorry. So the terms, as you can see here, we're kind of staggering the 4 experts so that they would each serve a 3-year term, but to get started, we have a kind of a staggered term there. And then also on the political appointments, they would be for 3 years. The appointment for the requesting agency, being the fire commissioners, for instance, or the library, their term would only be for the period of the time that project is before us. And the other change we made is under officers. We would propose that the commission elect a chairperson and a vice chairperson, not a secretary. The secretary duties can be covered by a staff, a hired secretary.
For the commission clerk.
A commission clerk or whatever, whatever the title be. And so that would be covered under that. And that the chairperson and the vice chairperson would be chosen from the permanent members, the 6 permanent members.
Okay.
And I believe that's all the changes we had proposed.
All right. Counselor Minor?
Thank you. First off, I think this would be a lot easier to do if we could have a clean, non-marked up version so we could kind of see the final language. But I've got, a lot of concerns, although I support the concept. I think a standing building committee or one should be established. My concern is the makeup, the way we're describing it here, really doesn't change from the existing standards now. So if we have a school project, we have, Board of Education members sitting on it. If we have, a Parks and Rec project, there's Parks and Rec Commission members sitting on it. I think by adding them in, taking them out for their specific projects, it's not doing any more of a service to providing a standing committee per se. So they would be subject to specifics of that project alone. With the makeup and composition of the body, I agree that all members that are sitting on it, regardless of political appointment or otherwise, should have field training or field experience. That is just going to help alleviate a lot of issues that may arise through the term. Additionally, I think the terms are too short, because in the example of the town hall, we've got coming up on 5 going into 6 years now. And a lot of the issues that have come up through time have been by people no longer associated with the project. And by doing this on staggered terms, you're having people changing in and out throughout the term that may not be aware of what occurred previously. And no different with the Anno Reynolds project, with some of the concepts being considered as of late were concepts that were chased down, you know, a year and a half ago on the previous term with previous members. So it's not that there was any ill intent. It's just they weren't aware of what happened previously. So I think until we can kind of get that under control, I think we should, you know, consider just keep working on this and keep working towards a common resolution. And I think we can get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Anist.
Thank you. I too agree with the concept. I've been wanting a permanent building committee since 2015, so I'm glad to see that we're working on it. But I think it would be a little bit easier for everybody to review if we take maybe your final edits and do it in a form that we can understand. It's very difficult with all this redlining and the different colors. It's very confusing to see exactly what's going on. I too would like to see the terms extended to possibly 4 or 6 years. I would also like to see 5 members that are appointed, that are recommended by the town manager and appointed by the council, and also would like the political appointments to serve the same term lengths as the appointments that are recommended by the town manager. They should all be considered the same type of appointments, and 2 from that. And I would also like to see 2 from the requesting agency, because there could be, if there's not a requesting agency and say it's the highway garage, you're only going to have 6 individuals. You're not going to have 7 because there's no board or commission that oversees the highway. So I think that needs to be looked at. And I think we need to really take a harder look at this, but with the clean copy. And maybe leadership can sit down, maybe Tim and myself could sit down next week and kind of go over it and make additional recommendations from each of our parties, rather than having your party, you know, we're getting this the morning of the meeting, you know, and we don't have a full enough time to really comprehend everything that you have changed.
Counselor Mankey.
Sorry, I'm having a little computer issues here with my mouse and it's clicking all over the place. I think the goal here is to make it less political and more professional, if you will, so that the people on the building committee would be more professional and have more of that knowledge that that I think you need to be on a building committee. You know, how things work, how things are built, how things are constructed. I think we did look at the terms. I think my big fear is if we made the terms 5 years, I'm not sure a lot of people would volunteer for this. I think that might scare people off. The people that get appointed can always be reappointed. I don't see why that, you know, that wouldn't, if you're an expert in HVAC, for instance, you'll still be an expert in HVAC 3 years from now. So they certainly could be reappointed. But I think the goal was to just make sure we can get people that are willing to serve. And I think sometimes maybe 5 years might be a long-term commitment. It may be that there are no building projects that would continue. But if there are a lot that goes on, you know, serving 5 years might be a burdensome on some people. And I think you can always be reappointed and you can take care of it. You can, you know, be put back on in that manner.
Okay, all set, Counselor Mankey?
Yes.
Counselor Minor?
Thanks. I understand where Tim is coming from. Again, just my concern is losing that continuity to have a project be essentially, 70% or 60% and change people out. You're now going into this with basically zero knowledge, or you're going to be playing catch up over the previous term, which, meeting minutes are not verbatim. And obviously people will not necessarily be exposed to all the information that came along the way. That being number one. And number two, I think just establishing a limit or a threshold on the bottom dollar value and an upper dollar value, realistically, any expenditure, over 975,000 by charter is, supposed to require a referendum if that's the way we're understanding the language. So I don't know if that is a cap number, that any project in excess of that is where, this group would step in. I don't think that there's a need for a building committee as long as we have strong facilities management in place and strong staff in place to look at projects under that, unless there's a reason for it. Maybe there is a reason for it, but a facilities director is more than capable of, doing HVAC replacement or roof replacement or, modifications to a building. There shouldn't be a reason for this to be part of that. However, there have been instances that building committees have been formed just for that reason that have been very disjointed. One that comes to mind is, townwide ADA for school system and the John Wallace wing. And, what exactly is going to happen with the existing building committees that are in place specifically? Again, Mill Pond is in play. It's, where exactly is that and what's going to happen to that committee should this change occur? The library expansion building committee, which has, I believe, been in place since 2015, 16, in that range. Again, what happens to them? I think we need to slow this down a little bit, clean it up, really be specific of what the intent is, and then bring it back to the table again after majority leadership or whoever irons this out. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see who's next. Councilor Donahue.
I'm with Tim. I mean, asking somebody to commit to 5 years, it seems like a long time, but I mean, this is actually no different than, we have, two people that, split a lottery ticket and they won and they leave the commission. You're in the same boat. So, I mean, there's, life changes that people could leave the commission on. That's going to put you in the same boat. Documentation for major projects is key. So, I mean, if it's not in the meeting minutes, it should be, documented, all the changes, everything else that, I realize it can't be verbatim because, counselors, we love to ramble on and on, but, you should be able to pick up a document and catch up relatively quickly. Okay. We're going back 2 and 3 years asking questions of people who were there. I don't, I see the value in it, but, I don't, I see it and I don't see it. Again, there was something else I was going to say, but I forgot. I will come back later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Donahue. Councilor Mackey, I'm going to jump in just because everybody had a chance and I feel like I need to weigh in a little bit, if you don't mind.
I would yield.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out a couple of things. The marked up copy, I thought, Councilor Innes, that you had requested that we do the markup so that you could see the changes. So I hope that I didn't misunderstand that. But and I don't disagree that it, you have to really take a close look to see what the new changes are. But in terms of the composition of the committee, I'm hearing a lot of different numbers thrown around, and we had started off asking for just 3 permanent professionals and then 2 political, so 5, and no voting members from the requesting agency. So I think we have done some compromising on both sides to say that, we should increase the number. So increasing from 3 to 4, and then keeping the political piece the same, because we're really trying to avoid politicizing this committee. So 1 from each party. And then we heard a lot of feedback at our last meeting that people wanted to have a vote from the requesting agency. So looking at making that a priority and giving one vote per the requesting agency, with the exception of the library, knowing that they have had 2 votes in the past on the current committee structure, and wanting to acknowledge that they own their own property. So making the change to give them the 2 votes, and that seemed like that was going to be amenable to them. So those are, I just wanted to point out some of the changes and some of the, what I view as compromises in original language versus current language, and trying to make sure that we're both kind of meeting in the middle to make sure we're doing this the right way. In terms of whether or not to take action tonight, I mean, that, you know, is up to everyone. I think I could go either way on it. I think we've made some nice changes. I think we've got a good policy in front of us. I think we did take out the language that takes out the major maintenance, because we wanted to be clear that this is meant for construction projects, building projects. It's not meant for maintenance projects. And so we would be looking to the charter language to govern what needs to go to a building, would be considered eligible for building. And then Councilor Minor had asked about, you know, who would decide what would happen. The language was clear that the council would decide based on the requesting agency coming to us, whether or not it would go to this commission or not. So that would go, it would come to the full council once it's passed. If the language was passed as is, then the projects would come forward from the requesting agency to the council for consideration on whether it meets the criteria to go through this commission. So that's my understanding of it. I respect that Councilor Ennis is saying, you know, that she's concerned about voting on something that has the markups in it this evening. So you know, I'll open it up for discussion on whether we want to go ahead and move this forward, or if we want to get a clean copy for our next meeting. But I just want to make sure that we continue to move this forward and don't let this stall. We oftentimes get kind of stuck in our own dialogue instead of getting things done. I want to make sure we're moving this forward. This is a very important commission that all 9 of us have said is important, and we are behind getting this done. So I want to make sure that we are all committed to getting this done. Let's see. Councilor Menke, did you want to go ahead?
Just, you know, I would just agree. I think, as Councilor Anna said, that, you know, we've been working on this for a long time, and it is a difficult topic. And I think it's important that we move ahead, because I think it's important that we start getting professional people to making our decisions about building projects, the people who have the expertise and the knowledge, as opposed to people who, frankly, like me, who just would come off the street and say, I'll be on a building committee, and have no idea how to, you know, how to build a building. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Minor.
I'm going to probably oversimplify this, but why don't we just take our existing ordinance as it is and change it to state that any appointment shall be required to have professional experience of within the construction trades or the legal, you know, however you want to expand it. But to be that simple would essentially accomplish the same thing. And again, depending on the number of projects, speaking to somebody that has served on one long-term, 5 years, and there's still 3 of us that are still the originals, and one shorter term of, you know, essentially 1.5 years, going 2 years, that, you know, with the exception of changes just on election, where the only changes, everybody's still there, would be that easy and that simple just to change that language and say, we're not looking for, you know, political conversation. We want to do these projects, but we want to do them as efficiently as it possible to try to mitigate problems that arise. But unfortunately, I don't want to steer anybody wrong, that issues in construction occur every day, everywhere. It's not something we're going to isolate. You can do whatever you can to mitigate it, but it's still always going to be there. There's always the unknowns. I'm just curious, other councilor comments, if we could leave it as it is, just by simply stating that any political appointment must provide a resume and have trade experience or have specifics within the project scope. Thoughts? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll respond to that. I think that the current ordinance, the way it was written, is It would still be political appointments coming from the two parties. I think it still ends up having people on a commission that represent a party and may feel like they need to be affiliated with the thoughts and views of that party. And that's what we're trying to get away from. So I don't think the existing language would serve, just by revising it, would serve the purpose or the thought process behind why we all wanted to start this. I know it would be a lot simpler to do it that way. I just don't know that it would fit kind of what our overall overarching purpose is in terms of trying to take the politics out. It would still have liaisons from political bodies also, because that's how the original is written. While I think that's a simpler idea, I don't necessarily think it would meet our overarching purpose.
But as it is, the main component of anybody being on this body is that they are an electorate from Newington. So that person is going to be party affiliated one side or the other, maybe not with stronger ties or not, but there already is an affiliation there in place. So again, just by simplifying and saying, you know, we want this to be non-political and we just want to see this project completed, I don't think is any different than doing it this way, because those people are still going to have, you know, some degree of loyalty to their party, whether it be local, state, national views. And there's no way to isolate that alone, I don't think.
I guess I think a little bit differently in that if I'm appointed by a town committee that I'm somehow affiliated with and got the appointment from them, and the allegiance is a little bit different than just having a global D or R next to your name. And, you know, if you're not really involved in a political party, you're not serving in any way or not part of that committee, then your allegiance is very different, I think, but that's my personal opinion. Councilor Menke, I see your hand up. Go right ahead.
Just to Chris's point, I think from my perspective, one of the problems with all of our committees and commissions is, and we sitting here on the council, we tend to see things as a Republican and Democrat. But there are a vast majority of people in the town that are independents, and they are extremely underrepresented on all commissions, and because they don't get an appointment, because they'd have to call the Republican town committee or the Democratic town committee and get an appointment in, and not to anybody's fault, those committees would rather appoint their own people than independents. I thinking back on building committees, I only know of one occasion when there was ever an independent put on the committee. And that's, I think we're looking towards getting away from political appointments and more towards appointments based on merit, or not merit, but maybe based on experience or knowledge of the process. I'm certainly, you know, I would have no problem with looking at this again next meeting after we get the markups in a final version. But I think we need to go forward with this. I think it's important for the town because, as we know, our infrastructure is failing, you know, fast based on the Owens report. And if we don't have something in place now, we're going to continue limping along and appointing committees who may not have the expertise needed to get us to where we need to be.
Thank you.
Yeah, just regarding the political leaning or influence, I would assume that those who are interested in serving on this committee, right now, you have to make your interest known through one of either the Democratic Town Committee or the Republican Town Committee. I would hope that these individuals would be able to make their interest known through the town manager or the facilities manager or whatever. So you're going to be independent of having to rely on the Democratic Town Committee or the Republican Town Committee on putting your name forward. I think that takes an awful lot of politics out of it, because you're going to get people who are out there who are not right now maybe sitting on the Republican Town Committee or affiliated with the Democratic Town Committee. You're going to get people who want to maybe do what's best for Newington, and they're going to be able to go through an independent process. But these people are still going to be vetted through the town council, which consists of, Republicans and Democrats, but they're going to be vetted through a bipartisan committee rather than having first gone through a kind of selective screening based on what their political leanings are. So, and also the term limit on this, their membership on this committee is not going to be subject to the whim on whether they do what their town committee leadership or agenda wants them to do. They're going to be, their membership on the committee and their serving on the committee, assuming they're doing a good job, is going to be based on serving out their term and not at the whim of bending to one agenda or the other. So I think this really does go a good way of taking some of the politics out of these appointments.
Thank you. Councilor Minor?
Thanks. Just to expand a little bit on Deputy Mayor Bedrego's comments is, again, not to overly simplify it, but what about keeping the structure of the appointments as we're talking about now, of going through a referral process through the town manager for council approval, which again, ultimately is going to have, either unanimous support or bipartisan support, whichever the case may be. And, going back to the point that Tim had made earlier, is he's correct. There are a lot of unaffiliated and independent voters in town. And I can speak to being one previously, and I was appointed by one party. But the point being that if you were to allow the process to continue through the town manager's office as being the entry point to this, but keeping the existing building committees as they're structured now, I think would be more appropriate to not overwhelming any one or another. So it's kind of the best of both worlds without getting into major changes, if that, makes any sense.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Donahue?
I'd like to see a clean copy and have the leadership go over it, make any changes, and then, maybe have it so we get it by next Tuesday instead of the day before the meeting, so that we can all look on it and agree upon it and go back and forth. I'm following the strikeouts and everything, but this is nothing I would, want to have as an official document.
All right. Councilor Minor?
I agree with John, and I think we could probably almost get a consensus at this point to allow leadership to go ahead, try to get a final markup on this and get it with a little bit of time to possibly, do a final mark and see if we have a document that everybody can agree on. I think that would be the best service to the residents in the town. Thank you.
I agree.
All right. So I need a general consensus. I've heard two, but if you all would just give me a thumbs up or nod your head. I agree. I think it makes sense, but I would really pose to the leadership, to Carol as the minority leader and Tim as the majority leader, that we come together between now and the next meeting. And if we can agree on everything, great. And if not, each of us provide to the other the language that we want considered, so that at the next meeting, we are looking to take action on this item.
Okay.
Councilor Menke?
Yeah, we certainly can do that. And we would probably just, if we can get maybe a meeting with James also, so as we go over the changes, we can type them in, at least the change we agree on, and then we can always type in the ones we don't agree on, and put them out on a clear, concise manner so we can all follow it.
Good. Councilor Nagel?
Just wanted to chime in that I officially agree that we should clean this up and bring it back to the council with the leadership having a discussion about what it is and what form it's in.
Councilor Annis, are you okay with that? Because you would be taking a role in that.
Yes, matter of fact, I made that recommendation earlier.
Okay. All right, so we will keep this on for our next meeting, and we will look forward to hearing what each side brings forward in terms of changes and suggestions. All right, next item, we removed the virtual meeting standards, so we are moving on now to new business. And we have with us the Sonnet Group, our grant writers, to give us an update on their efforts since we last saw them. I believe Sonia Richmond is with us.
Yes, hello, thank you.
Welcome.
For having me. I'm not sure if you have the handouts there, if I should share my screen, what's the better way? Oh, you got the handouts, perfect. So thank you again for having me. We're making good progress. If we can go to the next slide. So we were hired to do an assessment, identify some grants and start some grant writing. So I'm happy to say, if we go to the next slide. Here's where we had, one of the first things we did was poll the town staff to find out what's on their minds and what they needed. We had a form, it's an open form. People can contribute to it at any time. It will remain open. We had 9 responses from 6 respondents. Here's who gave us some information: the superintendent of Newington and Parks, town engineer, fire marshal, assistant chief, director of human services, and the Newington lieutenant of Newington Police Department. So I thank everybody for participating, and I encourage everybody else to, who would like to make their needs known, please, the form is still open. Next one. This is what was identified as needs, our high priority needs that they had on their mind. So this is what I've been using as I do grant search and grant identification. Next slide. So the potential grants that I've identified include the Connecticut Humanities Council, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, federal grants, the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development around SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office grants for historic homes, Department of Emergency Service and Public Protection, and that's still ongoing. We're still in a pandemic, so those grants will be available as well. Connecticut Deep for the trails. And I know there is a history of using the Neighborhood Assistance Act, the grants around town of Newington. Want to see if we could leverage that again this year. And the Harper Foundation, they have Harper Foundation for Public Giving has regular grants. And so that's, there's more, but this just gives you a taste. Next slide. The ones that I've put into play are having regular discussions, are doing a little bit more investigation as I'm working with Renata on the State Historic Preservation Office. So we're looking at the Historic Restoration Fund for historic homes and parts of Newington, seeing how we can leverage that. We'll have a meeting with Erin Fink shortly to discuss our options and get her approval of, we'll present some proposed projects to see if they have legs and if it's a good use of state money. The Connecticut Humanities one, I'm going to pursue more regularly once I understand where the state believes our historic homes are, because we have a lot of assets that are worthy of more public viewing. And I hope to make that get some grants around those things. For example, we have Newington Junction, which has the railroad house, which is a cute little asset that's could be, bolstered with signage and some more preservation activities around that. So the Connecticut Humanities has grants around making that more visible. Connecticut Deep is another one in progress. That's the Connecticut Trails Grant. The governor released $3 million in bond funding. There's $9 million total. $3 million is released this year. The grant is due November 1st. And we're going to take a look at how we can connect our trail. If you look at the map, there's a nice little segment that needs to be completed to connect the towns. So that will give us hopefully the right amount of points to make our proposal a competitive one. And then I'm looking at Department of Homeland Security more closely to see what assets we need in the town that around identified needs that we can fulfill through FEMA, through the fire grants, et cetera, which I understand one is underway. And then we have private resources. This is another grant that's due October 6th. It's just about done. The portal opens on October 6th, and this is a grant that from the firehouse subs for equipment. And what has been requested is Jaws of Life. The grants can go up to $50,000. The request is about $49,000. So that one will be submitted October 6th. Next slide. So this goes over the response a little bit more about the firehouse sub one, because that one's almost done. Next one. Okay, so here we are sticking to our time frame. We're in September. We're in the process of putting together proposals, and submissions will start going in. I'm hopeful that we'll have the Trails Grant one submitted November 1st. If not, I asked what if there would be funding for the following year, and the answer is yes. So if we need a little bit more time, we can put that together and submit it. And the same with the SHPO one, but I believe we should be able to submit, at least get those 3 in this fall if we put our head down. Okay, next slide. So I do have some discussion items that I want to bring up because I want to make sure that I'm following the protocol of the town and meeting expectations. I did already talk to Keith about the first one, about the program officer outreach, if the town was okay with me reaching out to program officers on behalf of the town, and the answer is yes. So I've made 2 appointments so far to get technical advice on both of those applications that we're seeking from the state. There is going to be matching funds on a lot of them. For state and federal money do often require. Private ones, they kind of just don't require that. So I'm looking to the town to give some guidance on how they'd like to approach how we would receive or obtain matching fund approval. The one for the trail grant is 20%, and that one is not bad because you can do in kind. So a lot of it could be, for example, volunteer trail cleanup, which you could put a formula, and we could get to that figure pretty quickly. So I'm not concerned about that. The SHPO one is a 1-to-1. That's a little bit more of a challenge. But I'm hoping that the projects we are identifying are things that the town had wanted to do anyway, and we're considering putting town money towards, and this would be getting the balance of that. So it would be less of a burden on the town budgets. And the other thing I'd like to discuss is having a little bit more access to the town's grant history. So I don't, I want to find out, I'm trying to find as much as I can publicly, but if I could find some more records that you have on hand about the ones that were awarded, and more importantly, about the ones that you wrote that weren't awarded, because I certainly don't want to go down a path that wasn't successful, or if I could take a look at them and see if I can spin them a little bit different and make them successful. So that's my presentation. Nick could not be here tonight, so it's just me. So I would like to open it up and get your feedback and questions.
Okay. Any council thoughts on the questions posed, Deputy Mayor Badrego?
Yeah, I am absolutely thrilled that you're working on the SHPO grants, because quite frankly, as a town, I think we've done a miserable job of preserving our history and our historical buildings. So any kind of assistance that we can get to focus on those types of grants are absolutely, I'm thrilled. I was just wondering though, when you were doing the outreach, you indicated the department heads that you talked to, but I was just wondering for the SHPO grants, were you able to talk to anybody from the Newington Historical Society? Because we have 3 buildings that I know are in pretty dire need, or at least they have been in the past, of leaky roofs. We actually, I think, had to close the barn at the Deming Young Farm because of the structural issues. So I was just wondering whether you reached out to them at all.
So far, I've worked with Renata. I'm at the very beginning stages of doing the outreach and doing the assessment of the properties. I understand there's, one of the things I want to discuss with Ms. Fink is to understand what kind of properties are eligible, and exactly what kind of, I do have a list, and I just want to make sure, but the more information, the better. So I will reach out to them upon your advice and get a contact and talk with them as well to see what their priorities are. We are, some of the properties are, I know that it sounds, I think the Kellogg Eddy House was the one where the roof was also in need of replacing. So we could possibly fulfill that, seek funding for something else in the house and maybe have that as a match, the roof that's already, so I'm trying to find things that are underway or the town has obligated. So that would get you your match pretty quickly. I'm looking at other towns, what they've received under the historic restoration funds. And I kind of see where they're going. They've been receiving about 100K, like 150K and then plus a match, the total project's about 300K, which are pretty decent to get in to improve the property value. And they've been mostly this kind of things that I've been understanding that the historic homes need. So there's that piece, and there's funding around there. I'm sorry. Thank you.
This past year and this past year's budget, previously in the past for historical maintenance, historical property maintenance, there was like $500 put in the budget every year, but this year we bumped it up to, I believe it was 50,000. So I don't know how that's been allocated yet, but it specifically is a line item in our budget that was substantially increased this year. And if it hasn't been allocated for anything, perhaps that could be used towards a grant match. I mean, I don't know whether that's possible or not, but just a thought. And the trail.
Go ahead, Keith.
If I may just interrupt, Gail. Joe Salamone, our facilities manager, is also looking at the historical homes and the CIP plan. He'll be talking with Tanya as we move forward. There is a lot of work to be done, and some work that had been done previously have created bigger problems than if it had not been done at all. So it is a big challenge, and it's going to cost a lot of money to get these historical properties back into a reasonable condition. But if that's the direction the council wants to pursue, then Joe and Sonia will be working together in the future to secure as many funds as possible to address these historic homes.
Super. Okay. Thank you very much.
Councilor Mankey?
No, I just was asking who has the information that she needs. Do we have a central repository of all the grants we've applied for, or is it by department?
I would say that that's a wonderful question, and I don't have the answer, and I don't know if James has the answer. He has a lot of records, but James, would you have all of them?
Anything that the council has authorized to go forward, whether it be old pilots, any of that, I will have accessible and searchable right now back to 2004. So if you want to get together, Sonia, we can go over those records, see what we can find for you, and put together a good listing.
Yes, and I do have also, I am looking for sources to save records as well. So I know I have that on my list. It didn't make, but I didn't forget you. So no, I should have put that up. Okay.
That's okay. I know I passed one along at our first meeting, but yes, that's okay. I knew that usually it's a little harder for the record side for us.
Yes.
Councilor Minor?
Thank you. I think to follow up on the question that was just posed, I think a central depository moving forward should be just something that's standard, regardless of the process we go for grants in the future. The second thing is, I know historically I've seen it go both ways over 4 years now of having department heads bring their grant applications, or at least the bodies of what they're looking to do, and who the lender is for the grant, to identify everything consistently into one central depository. I think would be huge, just for anybody's future records. That's something we should consider. And again, as well as having a matching funds account moving forward, I think also makes sense to build that up, because as the projects get larger, the matching funds equally grow as well. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Councilor Nagel?
I'd just like to point out that there is a Newington Historical Society that does exist. It's in the town booklet. They are readily available, and they have an agreement with the town for the Kellogg-Eddy House and the Kelsey House, that they are responsible for the interior, and the town is responsible for the body structure and the outside of the buildings themselves. The Deming Young Farm is another situation which is a little bit too intricate to explain at this time that you should investigate, but is kind of quasi connected with the Historical Society as well. The station on Newington Junction is another separate thing that the Historical Society does not overlook. They're all viable places and indeed do need care, and for one reason or another haven't been given the attention that they need to. I'm sure, though I can't speak for the Historical Society, though I am a member, that they would appreciate it if you're looking for things to having to do with help them with the interior, and also be aware of the nature of the historical building of one sort or another meets different criteria in many respects than just your typical house or building. And I hope we're aware of that. And hopefully you make that connection and we can work together to bring them up to the status that and the loving care that they deserve, because they are part of the history of Newington and culture of this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sonia, I wanted to say I'm really pleased to see all the work you've done already in such a short time. So thank you to you and Nick both. I hope we kind of answered your questions tonight. I know Keith answered the first, and then in terms of the matching funds, we do have a fund available. And then certainly in the past as a council, if a grant was brought forward that required matching funds, we would work in conjunction with the town manager in terms of available funds. If it was something that the council felt very strongly needed to occur, then that would be something we could certainly work on too. If there wasn't enough money in that particular fund, we could certainly at least talk about it and see what we could do to help. And I'm glad to hear James always has access to everything, so I'm glad he's on board.
Yes, this is my first call tomorrow morning, so thank you. And David, I will touch base with the Connecticut Historical Society, because I think there's a direct tie with the Connecticut Humanities and, doing some programmatic things as well. So I want to find out what's on the society's mind in terms of programmatic stuff as well.
Okay, you mentioned the Newington Historical Society,
yes,
I believe.
Okay. Alrighty. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we're going to move on next. Resignations and appointments. I don't see any. Do we have any this evening? Okay.
Nothing for this meeting right now.
Perfect. Next would be refunds. Approval of the September 28th, 2021 refunds for overpayment of taxes. Deputy Mayor Bedrejko, if you would.
Resolved that property tax refunds in the amount of $9,101.79 are hereby approved in the individual amounts and for those named on the requests for refund of an overpayment of taxes certified by the revenue collector, a list of which is attached to this resolution.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Anist. Any discussion?
Okay.
All right, seeing none. Everybody's unmuted for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item is minutes of previous meetings. We have before us the September 14th, 2021 public hearing minutes on Permanent Municipal Building Commission, September 14th, 2021 public hearing minutes on Land Acquisition Fund, and September 14th, 2021 regular meeting minutes. I would entertain a motion to approve those as written.
So moved.
Moved by Counselor Nagel. Or is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Braverman. Any discussion on these? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you. Next is written and oral communications from the town manager. Mr. Chapman?
I have nothing tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll move on to council liaison and committee reports. Counselor Nagel.
CROG is once again having meetings. They break during the summer. And at the recent CROG meeting, they have talked about developing a municipal jobs portal, which I've shared with you at another time, where towns can share with each other what jobs are available within the various communities and the greater Hartford area, really between the 18 towns that are members. They're also continuing their search for a new executive director, and hopefully when they have their meeting in October, they will be able to bring a recommendation to the board. There was also a presentation at the meeting of an nonprofit organization known as IRIS, the Incoming Refugee and Immigrant Services company or organization. And they informed us that indeed they have been given the oversight by the federal government to, without much notice, to welcome and resettle Afghan refugees in Connecticut. 9 families have already been settled in Connecticut. They've been told that over 100 families will come to Connecticut for them to try to get them settled and work with nonprofit organizations throughout Connecticut, centering around basically the Hartford area and the New Haven area, helping to pay for their living, having difficulty finding housing appropriate for them, and setting them up so that they feel part of the community and their families that they are working with to work in and use resources to make them part of our communities. And another thing was a grant coming forth from ARPA funding for regional opportunities, which deals with various kinds of projects involving economic development. I'm sure our town manager will be looking into that when it comes forth, if he hasn't found it already. And last but not least, as you know, the solid waste facility in Hartford that we may not be concerned with as much as others, but still they have pushed to have a study done to see what to do, to consult into what to do in terms to replace what is existing in Mary, either taking over that property or indeed finding other ways to deal with solid waste removal, which is seems to be a great problem, not only in the Hartford area, but throughout Connecticut in these times. And that briefly tells you what CROG is up to at the moment.
Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor Bedrejko.
Yes, just I found of interest at the Conservation and Wetlands Committee meeting. An applicant, they discussed an application for construction activities at Culver and Deming Streets here in Newington. It's a project that's going to be about 26 acres, and it had to come before Conservation and Wetlands because 2.5 acres of those 26 are wetlands, and approximately 9 acres is in the upland review area. So there was a pretty comprehensive presentation, but what I found interesting was planned for 225 apartments. There'll be 5 buildings of 4 stories each. This is the proposal. And currently it's right across, I think, from the Haltner Preserve. It's actually the ex-Haltner property and the farms. And there will be a public hearing on this in the Conservation Commission on Tuesday, October 19th at 7 o'clock. So I encourage anybody in the public who's interested to attend. And again, that's Tuesday, October 19th at 7 o'clock, the Conservation and Wetlands Commission, to discuss this proposed project for 225 apartments on Culver and Deming Street.
Thank you. Councilor Menke.
I'm certainly not a liaison, but I've been asked to remind everybody that the 150th Anniversary Committee is sponsoring a blood drive on October 6th. It'll be from 1 to 6. That's Wednesday, October 6th, 1 to 6. And it'll be at the lower level of Our Savior's Lutheran Church at 1655 Main Street. And walk-ins are welcome. they're trying to get 25 or more people to actually donate blood.
I scheduled my appointment. I'll be there. Thanks for the reminder.
Thank you.
Counselor Donahue.
Yeah, just another PSA. Don't forget that the library run is this weekend. And we're going to have a special guest. I can't think of his name now to save my life.
Will Rogers.
Will Rogers will be there signing copies of his book and, taking some pictures. So we're looking forward to that. From an NCTV perspective, it looks like Vision Point has finished their work in the town council side of the chamber. The Board of Ed has not decided how they want to do their meetings yet. My vendor is coming in Wednesday and Thursday to wrap it up. So hope we'll be at 99.9% by Thursday afternoon. And then, then hopefully the building opens so we can use it.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? All right, we'll move on to public participation. Any member of the public may raise their hand in the participants window of the Zoom app or by doing star nine in the if you're on your phone. The first one, there's no caller ID, but the last 3 digits are 150. If you could state your name and address for the record. Hello?
Hi, this is Diane Stam, 104 Steeplechase Drive in Newington. Thank you for all of your considerations tonight. One thing I thought I heard was that you have a $1 lease going on with public property. And as somebody who's gone through that recently, the former town manager did not think that the town zoning laws would apply because the town was renting or leasing the property, but in fact it did. So it made us go back and redo things. So just a reminder, a word to the wise. Just because the town is leasing it doesn't mean that you go by town rules. I think you still go through private property rules. So make sure you check into that for your plan so that you don't have to redo things as we learned a few years ago. As far as the building commission, there's been a lot of discussion through the library with what's going on. I was happy to see some of the changes to the language. If the overall size of the building commission is growing, as it looks like in this particular case, we would like to see more representation for the board because it is the private property. So that's going to be different from a senior center or a Parks and Rec area or something like that, simply because it's not a completely municipal property. I would also like to see the new cleaned up language as that goes through, and maybe a chance to have that out hopefully earlier. I know everybody's pressed for time, but so that people can see and comment on what it is, that would be very much appreciated. That's it.
All right, thank you. The next hand up is Rose Lyons.
Hi, Rose Lyons, 46 Elton Drive. I just want to clarify regarding the dog park. My concern that I voiced in the beginning of the meeting was not that I was concerned that you were going to be voting on the dog park tonight. It was that I was concerned about the enforcing of the ordinance at the Young Farm. And as for the roll call votes, again, I was not concerned about the town council, but I was concerned about other committees such as Conservation and TPZ. I have not watched Conservation, so I don't know what they do, but I know TPZ, sometimes it's a roll call, sometimes it's not. But those are things that can be taken to court. As far as the building committee, I'm in agreement with everyone that there should be a permanent building committee. This changing of the guard, as I call it, as the elections change, makes me feel like I'm in a gerbil cage, especially with this building committee with the town hall that's been completed. It just kept going round and round, discussing the same things over and over again, and it was quite evident that that information was not shared with everyone, and not out of malice or anything. I just think it just slipped through the cracks. the discussion on the roofs in the historical buildings, I am hoping that it's not the Kellogg Eddy House that still has issues with the roof. I've sat through numerous CIP meetings with 2 facilities directors who said that they had the roof under control. In any case, back to the grant writing, I'm glad to see that after all these years of my asking, and I'm sure other people have asked, that there be one person accountable for this grant writing, that we have someone doing it. I was hoping to hear more about the status of the grants that have come before you the last few years, especially with the roadways, with Garfield Street, Robbins and Maple Hill, Robbins and Main Street, the wide sidewalk by the landfill. There's a lot of things out there that have been discussed before you and have had public input, public meetings, and I see not a shovel in the ground for any of those projects. So I was just curious as to if we could get the people that are involved into the town council and let the residents know what's going on. There was a lot of uproar about what was going to happen, and I know it's DOT that's involved and it takes a long time with the state, but maybe some updates, and especially too, I mentioned before, the Rotary on Fen Road. Thank you very much. Stay safe, stay well, and hopefully one of these days we'll be back in person. But I'm kind of enjoying this Zoom business. Don't have to go out in the dark and worry about coming home late at night. Thank you very much for all you do. Good night.
Nice hearing you, Rose.
All right. I don't see any other hands up, so we will continue on with our agenda, which next is remarks by counselors. All right, seeing none, we will continue on. The next item is executive session regarding personnel for the town manager evaluation. If someone could go ahead and read that motion so we can head into executive session.
I will.
Counselor Mankey.
Resolved, the Newington Town Council in accordance with Connecticut General Statute 1-206A hereby moves to go into executive session.
Use me. I can't help it.
I'm going to mute Counselor Braverman. Go ahead.
And invites the town council members and the mayor to discuss a personnel issue, town manager's evaluation.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Nagel. I will just say that as we enter executive session, as always, it is a confidential session. It is imperative that if you are in a place where there are other people, that you find a room or a place in your home that is private and confidential. If you are able to use headphones in that instance, that would be of help as well. If you are not able to, then I would ask that you ethically choose not to participate in the executive session, just because this is of the utmost confidential nature, as is every executive session. All right, that being said, we have a motion and a second. I don't see any other hands up, so we will go to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Do we have, is a link been sent?
Yeah, I was gonna ask the same question.
Just sent out, thank you.
Just sent out, should be in your emails.
Appreciate it.
And the meeting is already open.
Thank you. The motion passes 8-0. Sharon, Counselor Braverman was away from her computer. Counselor Donahue, your hand's up. Did you have something?
No, I was asking about the link.
Okay, just making sure we addressed it. All right. I will see you all in executive session. We are not looking to take action tonight, so we will, just for the public's sake, there's no action looking to be taken after the executive session.
All right, see you on the other side.
Thank you.
I don't have anything. I want deleted items. I want to go back. Oh, all right.
Make a motion.
All right, welcome back into public session. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second. Moved by like 8 people, but Camilla's the first one I heard, so. Councilor Camilla, seconded by. Seconded by Councilor Ennis. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand at 9:29. Thank you, everybody.
Hey,
James, can you just stand for a sec?
Sure.
John, are you
Yes.
going